Good evening. Actually, this is not my first time to preach on Wednesday. It's the second time. Just to be corrected.
That's first time.
Sorry. Okay, first, the passage that I'm going to preach about today is I'll use two passages. John chapter 20, verse 19, and verse 24 to 28. It's chapter 20, verse 19, and then move to chapter verse 24 to 28. Chapter 20, John, verse 19, and then move to verse 24 to 28. 24. Chapter 20, verse 24 to 28. And then put mark on it. The second passage we're going to read is Luke. Luke chapter 24. Verse 13 to 21. Luke chapter 24, verse 13 to 21. Okay, if I have found it, then let's read a passage in Luke first. It's 13 to 21. Okay, let's read it together. Now that same day, two old men were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their face downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know the things that had happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed, before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel." Okay. Okay. Okay, then move to John. You put the bookmark on it to John. Chapter 20, verse 19. On the evening of that first day of the week, when disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then verse 24, a few lines later, now Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail mark in his hand and put my fingers where the nails were, put my hand into his side, I will not believe it." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hand. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Okay. Probably the longest passage ever used in this church. But I think it's good to use two passages instead of this one. Okay. In Christianity, there are many things we should know. Okay. The life of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus and all the parables that he liked to use to teach people, and a lot of theology. Okay. But sometimes we argue with people who have doubt. Okay. Sometimes we have doubt in ourselves. Doubt lies in our mind. But as for those arguments and doubts, this Christian faith comes down to one event. All this Christian faith hinges on one event that is greater than life itself. The resurrection of Jesus. Remember the time of persecution. On the night when Jesus was captured, a group of soldiers and leaders of Jews rushed into the place where Jesus and his disciples were staying. And then his disciples stood just next to Jesus, strongly, as if they were ready to fight. And one of the soldiers tried to seize Jesus. And then Peter took out his sword and cut off his ear. Then Jesus stopped him and said, "Stop, put away your sword. Shall I not drink the cup my Father had given to me?" From that moment on, Jesus behaved as if he had no power. As if he have not done any miracles. As if he never made a crippled man walk right away. As if he never calmed the storms. When the storms facing the boat where Jesus and his disciples were staying, and the disciples were in fear, and they woke him up. As if he had no power to bring down all the soldiers. As if he had no power to move away cross and take down cross and put away and walk away. To the point of death, he remained so permissive and obedient. That's all he did. On the cross, he was weak, frail, and powerless. When he was on the cross, the Jews crowd came and ridiculed at him and spit on him and cursed him. And they said, "Since he is the Son of God, let God rescue him now." But God did not show himself. Nothing happened. God did not interrupt. He did not punish anyone. Nothing happened. Everything went on as if there were no God, as if Jesus were not his son. Don't you feel strange? Don't you feel upset? This is just like when you watch a movie and your loving hero dies without no resistance, and you feel upset, you get angry. Maybe this is the same feeling you would feel at this moment. If we had died like that, this event just could have been just the death of one righteous person. If we died like that, that could have been just the death of a person who had so much enormous supernatural power but didn't use it for himself. A person who performed so many miracles but couldn't save himself. It could have ended just like that. But that was not it. That was not the end of the story of Jesus. On that night, on that morning, God raised his son from dead. By raising him from dead, he showed the most stunning and clear evidence Jesus himself came from God. He made known to everyone, he is from me. God used an extraordinary way to show his love to all mankind by sending his son down here and letting him die on cross in most painful and miserable way, and then raising him from dead in most dramatic way. So resurrection is very important. So we need to examine it if this is real. Because if it's real, it will change our life. If it's real, it will change many people's life. Here today, I gathered all the information about the resurrection of Jesus, and I will present to you a convincing case for the resurrection of Jesus. So you think, if this is real, and what it means to you and to your life. Remember, all these accounts in Bible are from first-hand witness. They watched it, and they recorded it. They all died in the same way on cross. They kept their faith. They kept their truth with their life. So this must be true. First, I'd like to point out several peculiar aspects of this story. First, notice that all the people, including disciples and followers, were described in Bible sad and devastated at that moment. It seems nobody expected any special thing could happen here. Nobody expected anything. This is clear when you carefully check the responses. First, Mary Magdalene and other women. Here the Mary is not the mother of Jesus. It's a follower of Jesus. Mary Magdalene and other women first found that the tomb is empty. See how they reacted. They thought someone took away the body of Jesus. So they were devastated. They were sad. So what they did was they were crying at the front of tomb. They were weeping at the front of tomb. And Mary ran into Jesus, and she was frightened. She was scared. And then she ran into the disciples and reported the news. You know what their response was? In the Bible it says, it was written just like this. They did not believe the woman because the words seems to them like nonsense. They first thought, this is nonsense. They were shouting to Mary, you must be crazy. How could you be alive? You must be out of mind. Secondly, the disciples were in fear. You should be able to understand this. They were in fear. First, take a look at the first sentence we just read. John chapter 20, verse 19. The first sentence. On the evening of that day, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for the fear of the Jews. They locked the door because they were afraid. They were afraid of the Jews who put Jesus on the cross. Imagine this. You are against leaders of your country, and you are part of a group who are arguing with leaders of your country. And all of a sudden, a persecution came, and your leader was killed. What would you do? You run away, and you would hide, because they will find you and try to kill you. This is the exact situation in which the disciples were in. So they were thinking, will they chase after us? Will they find all of us and put us on the cross? So they gathered in their own secret place, and they locked the door. They locked the door and remained in fear. Also, they were in doubt. Imagine this. They expected Jesus would do something. They knew he had the power. He had performed so many miracles. So they knew he had enough power to take all down. But that didn't happen. They never expected Jesus would die like that, without no resistance. They could not understand what happened. They didn't get it. And to them, it seems like everything they built were falling apart. Everything they built was collapsing. Now, all of a sudden, everything looked meaningless. Why did I follow him? Maybe he was cheating us? That doesn't make sense because he had so many miracles. What did I do? In Luke, the second passage we read together, there's another witness. In here, the two disciples were walking down the road to a place called Emmaus. Okay? They watched all things happen, and they were puzzled about what's happening. So while they were walking, they were talking about all things that happened. Jesus, who just resurrected, approached them and asked them, what are you talking about? And then first thing was, they did not recognize him. They did not recognize he was Jesus. The reason why they didn't recognize him, about that I will explain it a moment later. But anyway, they didn't know he was Jesus, so they told him all the things. They told him about everything about what happened, how Jesus was put to death. They said they were puzzled about the disappearance of the body of Jesus. And they were concerned about everything that happened those days. And final sentence that they made was this. They said they had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. Which means they had high expectation on him. But he did not meet this expectation. He died before anything happened. So they were disappointed and they were puzzled. And they did not expect anything. They didn't get anything about this resurrection will come and any miracle. This account on that morning tells us the disciples did not expect Jesus would resurrect just like that. So they were blind, just like us. They did not think Jesus, our teacher, is Son of God. He will come back. They didn't think it that way. They were just like us. They were sad. They were in great despair. They were strict by fear, and they doubted. They questioned. They were disappointed. Maybe we believed, we chased something we shouldn't. This is so real. So all this account is so real. And thirdly, notice, people did not recognize him. Everyone who saw Jesus after resurrection, they did not recognize him at all. Mary and other women saw the resurrected Jesus, and they thought he was a person who is keeping the graveyard. Someone thought he is a ghost. And also, remember the two disciples walking down to Emmaus on second passage? They thought they did not recognize Jesus at all. All these accounts point to the fact his appearance after resurrection might look different from what it used to be before his resurrection. Also remember, before his death, he went through so much ordeal. People beat him and whipped him. So we could imagine he would have so many wounds and scars and cuts all over the place. But after resurrection, all the witness does not say anything about these wounds. The only thing they said about is nail mark. Except that they didn't say anything about these wounds. This suggests his body somehow had changed. This suggests we could only imagine old wounds were somehow healed and old cuts closed up and new flesh grew from the cuts during the resurrection. Even more than that, Jesus did something we could not even understand. Take a look at the second sentence of John chapter 20, verse 19. The second sentence. First sentence was, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for the fear of Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said. What's wrong with this sentence? They locked the door. Okay, here the disciples were in fear, so they locked the door. But the next sentence said, Jesus came in and stood in the middle of them. Did he knock at the door? Did anyone open the door to him? Nobody opened the door for him. He came and stood among them. How did this happen? No explanation. But this person who wrote this Bible stressed that. Also remember the disciples walking down to the Emmaus. They did not recognize Jesus. And then when they sat with Jesus at the table, Jesus took the bread, okay, and broke the bread and gave it to them. At that moment, their eyes were opened, and they finally recognized he is Jesus. At that moment, Jesus disappeared from their sight. Again, this is strange. All these accounts, altogether, suggest that when Jesus was raised from dead, he did not have the same body. His body was different. Now, when you think about resurrection, don't you imagine resurrection in this way? There was a spirit in someone's body, and that spirit lives at the moment of death. And somehow, for some reason, the spirit comes back. And then he woke up. Now I'm alive. That's the kind of resurrection we tend to think when we think about resurrection. Okay? But the resurrection of Jesus was not this kind of return of spirit. The account of all these events written in the Bible tells us this resurrection is much more than that. His body had transformed into an appearance that even his disciple could not recognize. He was not ghost either, since Thomas touched him. And also Jesus ate fish with them. So he was not ghost either. How he was like, we don't know. We could only understand when we go to heaven. But these all things tell us this resurrection was not some accident, like we watch in movie, like some supernatural psychics tell us. This is not this kind of just living of the spirit living and comes back kind of things. This is far more than that. This requires a complete reverse of chemical reaction. And this should work against the third law of thermodynamics. This should go against all the physics law. This displays the absolute enormous power of God, the Father of Jesus. God showed us through this. God showed us the evidence so that no one could deny He is one all behind this. Now remember, when Jesus was on cross, the crowd ridiculed at Him and cursed at Him, and Jesus gave up everything. Powerless, weak, and He just followed and followed like a donkey. And God did not show up. He did not instruct. He did not reveal anything. Nothing happened. No miracles. Instead, you should know this. God had His own plan. He had to watch when His Son was cursed and ridiculed. He had to watch even when His Son suffered so much so that He cried out. He cried out His Father's name. He waited until Jesus is completely dead, until He becomes so dead. And then He waited one more day. And the next morning, He raised Jesus from death. Not only He saved Him, He clothed Him with a newly transformed body. This is an amazing miracle. Actually, this is not just a miracle. This is something far beyond amazing. Imagine if you had been there, you would not be just amazed. You would be shocked and awed. Remember when United States invaded Iraq, they said that the title of the war was shock and awe. So you must be shocked and awed. This is probably the case for Thomas, which was described in the second passage we just read today. The verse 24 to 28 is a story about Thomas. Here, Thomas, who was one of the disciples, one of the apostles, was not there when Jesus showed up to the disciples. So he heard about news from his other disciples. So they told him what happened. They saw Jesus. The reaction of Thomas was very strong. He did not believe it at all. What he said was, I would not believe it unless I see the nail mark in his hand and put fingers in the holes. How cruel he is and how cold he is. He had to put his fingers in the holes. Then he would believe. To this Thomas, Jesus appeared and asked him, put your fingers in my nail mark. He was shocked and awed. He was completely overwhelmed at what happened. And he bowed down and he cried out the most revealing words, my Lord, my God. Resurrection. This is the most clear demonstration that all Jesus' life and death and resurrection is the work of God. That is a mark that this is kind of thing only God can do. This is God's ministry through Jesus. He planned this. He waited. He endured everything for his plan. Now everything is accomplished. And then he raised Jesus from death with complete different new transformed body beyond our imagination. Through this, he showed his mighty power, the power that defies life and death. The power that divides the line between life and death. The power that no one can deny. The power that dominates over everything. Because he created everything. Our God raised Jesus in the most dramatic way. Now close your eyes and bow your head. Tonight, I told you a story about the resurrection of Jesus. I present to you the convincing case about the resurrection of Jesus. Now I ask you this question. Are you still suspicious? Are you still doubtful? Yes, the disciples were just like us. Their hearts were full of doubts and disbelief. But Jesus visited them and showed them his wounds and have them touch the wounds, his wounds and his nail marks. He asked them, put your fingers into this nail mark. Do you believe this? Then the doubt changed faith and the disbelief changed to confession. Now tonight, I urge you, read the Bible. Everything is recorded here, and true story. As Jesus himself served as a witness, now this book served as witness. Meet Jesus in that book. Even 2,000 years later, in that book, Jesus still visiting us and showing us his wounds and his nail marks. He yet again asks us, put your hands, put your fingers in this nail mark. Do you believe now? Touch these wounds. Touch this nail mark. You know, these are made for you. These are made to save you. Oh, Father, thank you. Thank you for giving us this message. Thank you for using me to deliver this message. Yes, you sent us your Son, the only Son, and you showed us your love through him. Now, still it is so difficult to believe all this through this book. Yes, we need desperately your help. Pour us your Spirit. Touch us, touch our heart, so that we can open our heart and just take it and just believe as it is, as fact. Oh Father, help us, move our heart, move the heart of every student who gathered here. Help they open their heart and embrace you. Show yourself to everyone who gathered here. Show your wound, show your nail mark, so they will believe. When they read the Bible, they will believe all things we have done through Jesus. Oh Father, be with us. Hold this church. Hold this church so that we can stand strong and can spread your message through this church. Hold each of the students who gathered here. Bless them. Bless them with your power and your Spirit so that they can receive enough power to perform their research. Give them wisdom so that they can rise as excellent researchers but also add your message to them. Let them have your heart so that they can spread the gospel. With an excellent researcher, with an excellent Christian, they will go out to this society and serve as light and salt of this world. We pray in the name of Jesus.